Hello everyone, welcome to my review and 1cc of Demonizer, a new indie shmup that came out yesterday. If you haven't heard about Demonizer, or if it isn't on your radar, it definitely should be, because I think this game is absolutely fantastic. It is unique and worth your time, and I hope this video can help more people discover it and check it out, because indie shmups, especially these sort of smaller releases, do have a hard time just getting the word out there of their existence, and so definitely check this game out. But the first thing I want to talk about is just kind of my initial impressions of Demonizer before its release. So I heard about Demonizer about a month ago. UBO posted a demo of it in the chat, and so I went in my Discord chat. So I checked out the demo, and I was immediately won over for a number of reasons. The first reason why I was won over by the demo is the visual style of this game. I love this visual style deep in my heart. I think it is something that deep down I've been wanting to see happen. And so just that alone, I was like, okay, we're on the right track here. Just hopefully the gameplay is good as well. Yeah, and yes, the gameplay is good as well. But on the visual side, it's really hard for me to pin down what exactly this visual style is. I'm sure someone a little bit more versed in retro games can be more exact. But it reminds me a lot of games I played on the PC back in the day, on my Windows 98 or something like that. That's what it really reminds me of. And it hit me with nostalgia in a way that a lot of these, I'm doing air quotes here, nostalgic games just don't do for me. For instance, like something like Shovel Knight or something like that. Yeah, if I hadn't seen 8-bit or 16-bit style games come out before, it would be nostalgic. But since that is such a saturated, common style, the Super Nintendo style, the Sega Genesis style, those don't really strike me as nostalgic because, I'm habitualized to that, and I never stopped playing those style of games. So there's no, distinctive, oh my gosh, when I was a kid, I remember playing that moment for me. But with this game, I did stop playing those PC games on my Windows 98 or whatever. And so when I saw this visual style, I was legitimately like, oh shit, this is really nostalgic. So yeah, I think the style is really cool. The pixel art is really great. Another thing that I really like about the visual presentation of this game is just how chunky everything is. This is something I've been trying to communicate more and more in these reviews, is that I love this approach, and I think it's a strong approach for shmups to do visually, is to start making things more big and more chunky, because as we've moved into these sort of wider screen ratios, especially 16:9 horizontal shmups really suffer from this, I feel like. What we're seeing happen a lot is we're seeing a big zooming out where the sprites become smaller, the bullets become smaller, and the screen feels more cluttered with just random crap, it feels like. And that's because shmups are very tied to their screen ratios, much more so than I think other genres like fighting games. You just make the characters bigger, not a big deal. But in shmups, that screen real estate is extremely important. And the trend that I've been seeing that I've not been liking is that we're sort of expanding that screen real estate, but keeping the old size of the sprites and the old size of the bullets, so that when you play, it just feels very zoomed out and kind of stale and static. But I've seen more shmups starting to catch on to, okay, we need to expand the size of the sprites because it's more pleasing visually. Think of Battle Traverse. Battle Traverse does this really well. And I think Demonizer does this extremely well as well. This is less common of an issue with vertical shmups in general, but I do see how big and chunky the player sprite is. I like that. See how big and chunky those options are. I like that. And the enemy sizes generally are pretty big. The little small arrow dudes are a bit on the smaller side, but for the most part, the bullets, the backgrounds, and especially your player character are nice and big, and I like that. It just gives the game a more visceral, satisfying feel. So that's another thing I wanted to comment on with the visuals that I really liked. One criticism that I have of the visuals that I think is extremely easy to fix, extremely easy to patch, and maybe actually a bit of an oversight, is the UI elements on the bottom. So with the UI elements, I've noticed, and you'll see this as I play in other stages, if you go back, you are actually underneath the UI elements. And for me, that's a pretty big issue but it's actually super easy to fix. So he may fix this by the time you see this review. But basically, if you fly down, you can see right there, like I'm underneath. See how I'm underneath the max? I'm underneath that bar. What he needs to do is he needs to switch the layering so that you're above it, right? He needs to add depth to the UI elements so that you're above them. That way, when you're dodging bullets and dodging things, you're not hiding underneath the UI elements and not knowing what's going on. That I remember that really caught me off guard when I was playing. And this is really early. You know, the game just came out yesterday, so there are little things that can be adjusted, and I think that's one thing that would be pretty easy to fix. Another alternative too would be, I'm playing this, you can't tell in the replay because I've, done editing and stuff, but I'm actually playing this rotated. So I'm playing it Tate. And so there's a good amount of side real estate in the gutters. That's what I call it. That's the space of the screen that usually just has the backgrounds and stuff. I call that the gutter. Another idea would be if there was an option in the options menu to move the UI elements into the gutter so that you just have the whole screen to yourself. I think more indie shmups might consider doing this because, I mean, I understand that the idea is to put the UI elements on screen because if you're playing on 4x3, you need to do that. And I agree, that's a good idea. But I think if we start adding that option in, most players are going to utilize it because most players don't actually play on 4x3 screens anymore. So that's another idea. But anyway, let's start talking about the gameplay of Demonizer, because I do like the game feel a lot and it has some very unique elements. For instance, as you see here in this stage, there's actually a little screen booby trap, something like out of Turtles in Time, where you see that glowing rocks. If you fly over the glowing rocks and you're too slow, they'll blow up and kill you. So you have to be really careful of that. That's a very unique stage hazards in vertical games are very, uncommon. So I think this is a cool idea, and that's what I really appreciate about Demonizer, is it is experimental in some ways, but it also keeps itself nice and grounded to where it's not ridiculous. But yeah, there's lots of little elements in Demonizer, like little stage hazards, enemies summoning, bullet herds, and then there's a really interesting mixture of bullet speeds in this game as well that I think is pretty cool, where you can get, as you can see here, you can get these kind of sections of slow moving bullets, but then there are certain enemies that will spawn and blast you with high speed, like psycho speed bullets. So what's interesting about Demonizer is it feels like it's drawing inspiration from a lot of different sources and blending the pieces together really well. I think this, I can really find a certain demographic of the shmup audience really connecting with this game, because it is unique that in ways that I can't really find in other games. Another thing that's unique about it is the cover systems that the enemies use. This is something I've personally never come across, though I'm sure some shmup has it, but you have enemies that will take cover behind things, and so you have to sort of track them between cover and be prepared for them to jump out and snipe you and stuff. And I feel like of all the shmups I've played, this game is one that scares me the most as far as stuff just popping out and shooting you. Almost like a cover-based, like third-person shooter or something like that. Really cool idea. See, but what I was talking about before, you see those big bow and arrow type catapult things? Those guys will launch some real high-speed bullets, and here you can see enemies taking cover and stuff. Another element on the gameplay that I want to talk about that really tripped me up when I first started playing, but I got used to it after a few hours, was enemies in this game will shoot much lower on the screen than in other shmups. What I mean by that, and I'm not sure if this is an oversight or just a part of the deliberate game design, I kind of feel, based on the way the patterns are laid out and stuff, I think this is deliberate. But usually with shmups, if an enemy gets to about the lower bit of the screen, kind of where the bar is and stuff, they won't shoot anymore. They'll just walk off screen, because otherwise you'll get sniped from the sides a bunch and stuff, especially in bullet hells. In this game, they will shoot. They will shoot real low on that screen, so that's something you have to be really mindful of. And it kind of changes the dynamic of the way you play, mostly, especially in bullet hells and shmup and stuff like that. The bottom of the screen is you kind of lead yourself back there, and you usually end patterns near the bottom of the screen. But in this game, there's a lot of patterns where you have to actually run forward to the kind of upper area of the screen, because otherwise you'll get sniped from below from things just spawning. This stage is a really good example of that, as you'll see. Keep an eye on the bottom of the screen here and how low enemies will shoot from the bottom, and also how low enemies will spawn and attack you from the bottom. But yeah, this is a really fun stage. Presentation-wise, this game has a lot going on too, where the way it does like scenery switching, and it feels like certain stages will scroll at different rates than others and stuff. It just gives a nice dynamic feel. But watch these bow guys. This is what I'm talking about. They'll get right down there at the bottom of the screen, see, like that, and fire from the bottom of the screen. So that's something that you've always got to be mindful of. You're never quite safe, is what I'm getting at. You're never quite safe in this game. And this is when you first hit the big difficulty wall, I would say is this stage. Speaking of the gameplay and level design, the difficulty curve of this game is pretty interesting, where it's pretty smooth for the most part. It's a little bit of a longer game. I think it has 7 stages, something like that. I can't quite remember, but it's a bit of a longer game. The stages aren't all that long, but it's long stage-wise, but I think time-wise it's equal to other shmups, 20 minutes, somewhere in there, but the difficulty curve in this game is when you're playing the first 3 stages, it's going to mislead you into thinking this game's an easy shmup. You're like, oh, I'm playing on normal mode, but even on normal mode, you're thinking, oh, okay, this isn't all that challenging of a game. But then once you hit this stage and onward, this is where stuff gets real. It's like, okay, now you have to really play. And this has some old school-ish feels to it, because it's a very momentum-heavy game where with the options and stuff and your power-ups, you can get some kind of Gradius syndrome where once you die, you lose your power-ups and I think you get your options, but you lose your power-up. And you can chain death pretty easily. And you also don't respawn with bombs. You basically can collect enough items on your death to gain 1 more bomb, but you don't respawn with all 3 bombs again. So that's why I'm saying the way I sort of strategized my routing for this is being very mindful of using those bombs preemptively rather than reaction-wise. Use them preemptively. You're planning your bombs. Again, more like Garega. You're planning them out. You're routing them out. You're kind of doing some calculations on, oh, okay, if I bomb here, I'm going to get enough items to recover the bomb. This is a very momentum-heavy shmup, which will definitely play out in the last stage, where you can get some real brutal chain deaths. And the last stage is you want to come into that fully powered up and with a good amount of resources, because that's where you're going to hit a huge difficulty spike. So you can see here how the enemies are hiding behind the trees and you can't hit them. It's pretty cool, but you can still track them. Again, and if you bomb, it'll hit them. So bombs will break cover, which makes sense. See how I have 3 bombs? So I should bomb there, right? And I do not believe there is a scoring advantage to saving up the bombs, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So let's talk a little bit about the scoring system. I don't have a whole lot to say about it because I don't fully understand it, to be completely honest. But from what I understand, here's what I know. So you want to kill as many enemies on screen as possible, because it does seem like killing enemies and making sure you're maximizing taking out every single enemy does seem to significantly contribute to your score, more than in some other shmups. Another thing too is you see beneath the life icons, you'll see that the bat wings with the 20. So that is a multiplier that you cash out at the end of the stage. However, I'm not entirely sure how that multiplier works, like what contributes to it, what doesn't. It doesn't mention in the game's tutorial. I'm sure there's probably some research I could do to figure it out, but within the game itself, it doesn't actually say. But just experimenting around with it, I could tell that, of course, not dying maintains that higher. But I'm not exactly sure what causes you to gain those Batwing scores or not. I'm not sure. I'm sure someone in the comments can clarify. But essentially the idea of scoring in this game is, it seems pretty straightforward. But again, there could be some deeper meta that I'm not picking up on. But the basic idea is not die, obviously. Use your bombs preemptively and strategically to maintain not dying, because again, you can't panic bomb to save yourself. And then when you die at the end of the stage, you'll cash out that multiplier here. And then when you cash out at the end of the game, this is the big one, your lives are worth a lot of points. And that's going to come into a big effect in the next stage here, the last stage. So there is kind of that Dodonpachi maximum style thing with your lives where you want to, you can improve your score just by, not dying, basically, by cashing them out at the end. That sounds obvious, but actually there's a ton of shmups out there where that's not the case, where your lives aren't worth much, and you actually don't want to cash out your lives. You want to expend them, like Grega, for example, right? Grega, I don't believe there is a cash out system on your lives. Instead, it's just you want to expend your lives to gain special meter or special weapons, the bombs, and then use those to gain more points and medals and blah, blah, blah. So it is different in that regard. It's kind of, that's why it doesn't feel totally like a Raizing game, because it also has a little bit of that Dodonpachi cave feel, where cave games, in a lot of them, you can cash out your lives for points. So that's as much as I know on the scoring system. This guy's a little bastard, I'll tell you that much. This boss fight is brutal, but if you just bomb on his head, he's goner. That's actually a lot of the boss fights, is bombs are a huge part of strategically preparing yourself. So this section here, I'll give you a little bit of advice, because this section I spent hours practicing. So these little guys come up and snipe you, and if you're just trying to dodge them, it's extremely difficult, especially if you're not highly powered up. The way you do it is when you kill them, they'll drop those little red hearts, and those little red hearts add to your power bonus and add to your options, but they also grant you a little bit of invulnerability. So the way you do it is you kind of chain the red hearts together so that you're having maximum invulnerability between them, and that will get you through that section pretty consistently. This last stage here, this part here, is really challenging, and this is the part that I found the most challenging, with the whole shooting you from the bottom of the screen, because a lot of those enemies, that's why I was bombing, a lot of those enemies, when they get low on the screen, they will shoot you and trap you. Preemptive bomb there, definitely do that. Very clean last stage, like extremely clean here. I'm really proud of how this went. So what's funny is when I streamed this game, I got what I believed was a 1cc because of a glitch. So if you beat the final boss, the night boss you'll see here, in the very, very first hours of the game being released, it would actually end the game there, and it would say, okay, thanks for playing. If you want to buy the full version, buy it on, itch.io and whatnot. But I had already bought the full version, and so I never actually got the TLB, the true last boss. This was the final boss. So when I streamed this live, I was like, oh, okay, that was it. I did it. Then I found out when I was going to replay and re-record just for a higher score for this video, I found, oh shit, there is a TLB. So then after that, I had to spend some time practicing the TLB, and then yeah, redo the run. So the game's this boss fight is actually really challenging, and the reason for it is he'll kind of wipe out your bombs, but this pattern here is the killer, and this is where chain deaths really come into play, because he'll nullify your bombs, and it's just really hard to kind of predict where those bad boys are going to go without getting hit. Oh yeah, this guy will be a pain. So I want to lay out a few small criticisms of the game before I end the video, because we're coming up to the TLB here. And I found kind of a broken strat to take out the TLB. But my biggest criticism of this game, which I think could be fixed pretty easily, it has to do with the stage select and the way it works. Because I was trying to practice that last boss fight there. But the problem is that there is a stage select, which is great, but there is no ability to choose how much power you have going into the stage select, or how many bombs or anything like that, or how many lives. And that's an issue, because that means you start each stage fully powered down, And if you go into the harder difficulty modes like hard mode and stuff, it makes the stage select essentially useless because you're too weak to actually play your routes effectively. So my biggest criticism is that I think he should add some kind of power up selection to the stage select. So you hit stage select and it's like, okay, what do you want your power level to be? What do you want your bomb count to be? What do you want your life count to be? The other criticism that I have that I think he could also just fix, I don't know how easily, but probably not too difficult, is to add a boss select. Because a lot of those bosses, you're seeing that I was able to just sort of take them out with just bombing them. But I would actually love to practice them more straight up without using bomb strats. And in order to do that, I think having a boss select would go a really long way. I think that's just kind of a standard thing most shmups should do, even indie shmups. They should have a stage select at the very least, with power-up selection options so that you can go into the stage fitting what your route is, and then also a boss select so you can practice those bosses. But yes, shout outs to the Demonizer team, the Demonizer developer. I think it's Iori something. I missed it. Iori Bradford. There it is. Right there. Yes. Definitely a KOF reference. Or maybe his name is actually Iori. I have no idea. But yeah, shout outs to him. This is a really awesome shmup. And I do hope you all check it out. Definitely worth the time. And the fun part is that if you buy it on itch.io, that's the last thing I want to talk about, is get this game on itch.io, because not only does it support the dev more because he gets a better, cut and all that sort of thing, but also it's great because it comes with this comic book, which is really cool. And it also comes with a Steam key, so it's a win-win. So you get a Steam version, you get the itch.io version, and it comes with a comic book. Definitely the way I like to do it. So thanks so much for tuning in. If you made it to the end of this video, I think it's means you must have enjoyed it on some level. So please subscribe and get yourself notified, all that kind of good stuff. And let me end by thanking my patrons. So thank you to Dingo, Anycapped, Anthony A, Ben Wynn, Borgie22, Corio, Disco Star Slayer, Eric H, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, Kiwi, JB, RPG, Joe Angelo, Game Boy Guru, K, Malaise, Mark Toms, Martin Worrell, Maz, Mayhair Calendrian, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Okla Kugels, Ram Q, Raul, Smacky Factor, Sagumo, Plasmo, and Utakaya. Thanks for watching.